Welcome back to Wired to Be Rich, everybody. And if you're new here, like I always say, welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so happy you're here. Genuinely, you guys. This is a space where we talk all things wealth, from finances, spiritual and mental health, and physical. And today we're allowing our brains to roam free and free think without fear or embarrassment. This is one of those episodes where I'm going to say something, you guys, and you might be like, girl, what? But just stay with me, okay? Don't click off. Don't judge me yet. And just hear me out like we're sitting across from each other having a cup of coffee or tea, Because lately I've been noticing patterns within the news and our political government system. And I know how it sounds. I know. But at what point do we stop calling everything a coincidence and start asking if maybe, just maybe, things are a little more coordinated than we think? So yeah, this episode is very much, I might sound crazy, but hear me out. And if you get it, you get it. And if you know, you know. So let's get right into it.
She's not just a podcast host. She's a movement.
Manda Lea is teaching people how to break cycles and build real wealth, mentally, financially, and spiritually.
People all over the world are waking up to her message.
Wired to Be Rich isn't just a podcast, it's a mindset shift.
She makes you believe again in yourself, in your power, and your ability to actually have the life you always known was meant for you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Manda Lea, entrepreneur, speaker, and founder of Balance and Destiny, and this is Wired to Be Rich. Okay, so let's start here, because this is really the part that made me pause in the first place and be like, wait a minute. You're telling me we have this whole situation recently where Trump had already said he wanted to televise a Sunday prayer every single Sunday. Like, that was already on the table, you guys, already introduced, already something people were aware of. And then shortly after that, we get this supposed attempt involving Trump and JD Vance at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Something that immediately becomes a big deal, gets attention, gets people talking, right? It creates fear, creates emotion, all of that. And then on top of that, the person involved is being labeled as, quote unquote, Antichrist. Like, I'm sorry, but that combination is kind of wild to me, because now it's not just an event, it's a storyline, you guys. You have prayer already being positioned, then you have an attack, and then you have the person tied to that attack being framed in a way that is literally the opposite of everything that prayer represents. And I'm just supposed to take all of that in and not even pause? Because for me, it's not even about saying what's real or fake anymore. It's about recognizing how perfectly those pieces fit together from a narrative standpoint. You introduce weekly Sunday prayer, something that feels spiritual, grounding, morally, quote unquote, right to a lot of people. And then almost right after that, you have a moment of fear and chaos tied to that same figure. And then the person responsible is labeled in a way that feels like the complete opposite of faith, like the villain on a spiritual level, not just a political one. That's not just random information being given, you guys. That's a full emotional arc being created in real time. And that's why I keep going back to the timing of everything, because it's not just about what happened. It's about the sequence. You have prayer first, then fear, then a clearly defined evil attached to that fear. And when things line up like that, my brain is always going to pause and be like, okay, what am I actually looking at? Because this feels way more structured than people want to admit. And again, I'm not saying Sunday prayer itself is a bad thing. It's not a bad thing at all. Everyone's religious or spiritual in their own right. That's not even the point, though. The point is how it's positioned next to everything else, because when something feels comforting and something else feels threatening and they're tied into the same narrative window, it shapes how people think without them even realizing it. And this is where my mind goes into theories, because you have to ask, why would something like this be presented this way? It's one thing to say, okay, maybe fear and prayer being placed next to each other creates an emotional association. But the bigger question is why? Like, why would anybody even want that to happen? So imagine this, right? You're just a regular person, living your life, scrolling your phone, minding your business, and then suddenly you're hit with this big, intense situation involving a political figure. In that moment, your brain immediately reacts the way human brains do when something feels threatening, right? Which is to look for something that feels safe, something that feels certain, something that feels grounding. And right there, almost seamlessly, you're also being shown this same figure stepping into something like televised Sunday prayer, something that feels calm, structured, morally aligned, something that doesn't feel chaotic at all, right? It makes you feel like, okay, I can trust this. This makes sense, right? This is something that feels right to me. It's the right thing. And now, without even realizing it, your brain has connected those two moments, boom, instantly. The chaos and the calm, the fear and the relief, the uncertainty and the thing that feels certain. And that's where it starts to feel less like coincidence and more like conditioning. Because human beings don't just respond to information, we respond to patterns, repetition, emotional pairing. So if people are repeatedly exposed to fear, instability, threats, and then immediately shown something that feels grounding right after that, the brain starts linking those experiences together automatically. So now let's take a step further into this discussion. Okay. Are y'all intrigued yet? Because when people are in a calm state, they think clearly, they question things, they analyze. But when people are in a heightened emotional state, especially fear or uncertainty, everyone becomes more perceptive to guidance, right? They look for answers faster. They look for someone to stabilize the situation. That's not even controversial, what I'm saying right here. That's just how humans are wired from a genetic standpoint, psychologically, biologically, everything. So, if a moment of fear is introduced and then immediately paired with a spiritual or moral framework like prayer, alignment, or righteousness, what you've created is not just a reaction. You've created an emotional pathway where people begin to associate that framework with safety. And that opens the door to something even bigger, which is the possibility of a savior narrative forming in a subtle way where people start to feel like this person is not just the leader, but someone who is being targeted because they stand for something bigger, something moral, something almost protected, right? And once that shift happens, everything changes because now it's no longer just politics that we're playing with here. We've entered an entirely new playing field. Now it's emotional loyalty. It's identity. It's people feeling like they're defending something meaningful, not just agreeing with policies. And then when you layer in something like the Antichrist label being attached to the opposing side of that moment, it sharpens the contrast even more because now the story isn't just good versus bad in a general sense. It's framed in a way that feels spiritual, symbolic, almost archetypal, if we're being honest. And that kind of framing doesn't just inform people, it organizes them. It sorts them into sides emotionally before they even think logically. So now you're not just dealing with a political event, you're dealing with the psychological and cultural sorting mechanism where people align themselves based on how the story feels, not just what the facts are. And that's what makes this feel so deep to me because this is not just about one situation. This is about how information, timing, language, and emotion all work together to shape perception at a scale. Now, let's talk about the religion and power combo and why that always shows up, right? Okay, so this is where it starts to feel even heavier for me because now I'm looking at everything that's happening, not just domestically, but globally. And I'm like, wait. This is multiple storylines all moving at the same time. So now we also have what's going on with Iran. And it's this constant back and forth. We're hearing talk about ceasefire. Then we're hearing there's no argument. Then it's we're working on it. Then it's actually we really aren't. And it just keeps looping and looping and looping. And I'm sorry, but at what point do you ask, is this actually about ending anything, or is this about keeping people in a constant state of anticipation? Because when something is truly about to end, it doesn't feel this dragged out, you guys. This back and forth, this emotionally inconsistent. This feels like something that's being managed in phases, like the public is being slowly walked through it instead of hit with it all at once. So now it's like, what if this isn't about resolution right now? What if this is about preparation? Because if you think about it again, if something bigger were to happen, not saying it is, but if it were to, hypothetically, like real escalation, like something that genuinely shifts things on a larger scale, the worst way to present that to people would be out of nowhere. That would create panic. It would create chaos. It would create a reaction that's harder to control. But if you slowly introduce tension, if you normalize the idea that things are unstable, if you keep people hearing about conflict over and over and over again, then when something bigger happens, it doesn't hit the same way. It lands on people who have already been mentally preparing for it without even realizing it. And that's what this back and forth feels like to me. It feels like people are being kept right on the edge, not fully at peace, not fully in panic, just in this constant state of something might happen. That's a very specific emotional position to keep a population in, you guys, because in that state, people are more accepting of escalation because they start subconsciously suspecting it. So when I look at everything together, the supposed assassination attempt, again, the Sunday prayer being introduced before that, the way narratives are being framed, and then this ongoing war conversation that never fully resolves itself, it starts to feel like layers of a bigger setup. And I'm not saying I know exactly what's going to happen, but I will say this. I will not be surprised at all if at some point the storyline shifts into justification for escalation. Something like, we have to respond, or we have no choice, or this was necessary because of what they did, because that's how these narratives usually evolve. Not all at once, but in steps. First, there's awareness, then tension, then emotional investment, then justification. And by that time it reaches that last step, most people are not reacting with shock anymore. They're reacting with acceptance because they've already been walked through the story piece by piece. And this is why this doesn't feel random to me. It feels like things are being introduced early so that when they expand later, it doesn't feel sudden. It feels expected. And that right there is what makes me pay attention the most. Now, for the part, so let's talk about the way they frame people. It's like the way that they frame things is always so convenient, right? Whenever something happens, we don't just get the event, right? We get the story, and the story always comes packaged so neatly. This person is good. This person is bad. This person represents this. This person represents that. And it's always framed in a way that makes you feel something immediately. Because once you feel something strongly, you stop questioning things as much, right? You just accept it and you move on. And I'm like, why does it always feel like we're being handed a finished narrative instead of raw information? Why does it already feel decided for us how we're supposed to feel about that? That part always makes me kind of pause. I'm not going to lie. Now I want to talk about something else a little bit different. Let's talk about this recent space mission. Okay? Because who are they fooling? Not me. Not you all. I know that. Because this is the part that really had me like, hold on. What just happened? It was cute, but let's talk about it. We literally just sent people around the moon. Like actual humans went up there, circled it, came back, and the way it was talked about was so casual. Like, oh yeah, we went to the moon. Got some cool pictures, tested some stuff. Now we're back doing press conferences. And I'm sitting there like, do you hear how insane that sounds when you actually think about it? Because that is not a casual move, you guys. Forgive me and my finance brain for constantly going here, but That is billions of dollars that was already spent. Years of planning that already happened. Insane levels of technology that already had to work perfectly. People coordinating across multiple sectors, approvals, risk management. Everything had to align for that to even go through. And we just moved on from it like it was a regular update. No, I'm sorry, but no, because nobody spends that kind of money and effort just to go see what's up or to give us a couple pretty pictures. That's not how anything at that level operates. Everything that big already had purpose, already had layers, already had long term implications built into it. So now my brain goes, okay, if it wasn't just about the pictures, Amanda, then what was it really about? Here's a theory that actually makes sense to me. Not even on some wild conspiracy level stuff, just on a strategy level, you guys. What if that mission was really about testing whether humans can consistently operate in deep space again under current conditions? Think about that. Because we haven't done that in decades. Technology has changed. The environment has changed. Global competition has changed, you guys. And before you go any further, you have to prove that right now, with today's systems, humans can go out there and come back safely. That's not just a test. That is a statement. You guys, that is a statement. It's saying we can do this again and again, and we can do it better. And that matters because space is about positioning, you guys. It's about who's ahead, who has capability, who can move first when it comes to building, accessing resources, or expanding beyond Earth. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Around that same time, we're also hearing about a habitable planet being discovered, something that's being described as Earth-like, somewhere that could potentially support life. And I'm not even saying that means we're about to move there tomorrow, but it adds another layer to the conversation. When you think deeply like I do, you don't just take things and be like, that's cool. I mean, it is cool, but it's like, okay, but why? Because now it's not just we went to the moon. It's we went to the moon again. We're proving we can operate in deep space again. And oh, by the way, we're also identifying other places that could potentially sustain life. So I'm like, now we're talking about capability and possibility at the same time because that doesn't feel random. And then on top of that, you have people comparing images of Earth from decades ago to now, like the older images in 1976 versus the more recent ones here in 2026, and noticing differences in how the planet looks. Talking about how it appears less vibrant, more affected, more worn down in a sense. And again, whether every comparison is perfectly accurate or not isn't even the point. The point is the conversation that it creates. Because now you have three ideas sitting next to each other at the same time. We can go farther than we've gone in a long time. There may be other places that could support life, and Earth might not be in the same conditioning it used to be. And it may be our fault because we fucked it. Excuse my language. And I'm sorry, but when you put those three things together, that creates a very specific type of thought process in people. It makes people start thinking long term. It makes people start thinking about sustainability even more, about future options, about what comes next. And that's why this whole thing stands out to me so much because it doesn't just feel like isolated updates. It feels like layers of a bigger picture being introduced slowly. CPC, capability, possibility, and condition. And when all three of those things are being talked about at the same time, I'm always going to pause and be like, okay, what direction are we being prepared to think in? People just don't do stuff for funsies, you guys. I know that, like, my generation, Gen Z millennials, we are so unserious, but like literally no one does anything for fun. No one. You got to think smart, you guys. Okay, that was rude. Not smart, but you have to think in deeper analysis. That was better. Because again, I don't need everything to be some extreme hidden truth for it to feel intentional, right? We're not going off the deep end. I just need to see how the pieces are being placed next to each other. And right now, the pieces feel like they're building towards something bigger. Now listen, This is where I'm going to say something and y'all are going to be like, okay, Manda Lea, but just stay with me. Okay? Rock with me because I rock with you. If something was staged, exaggerated, or even just strategically presented, there would have to be a reason, right? And the reasons are usually pretty simple. Control how people think, distract people from something else, or prepare people for a major shift. That's it. That's it. It doesn't have to be this big dramatic conspiracy that people on Reddit love to spew every single night, every single minute of the hour. Sometimes it's just managing perception. It's a PR thing. Because if you can control what people focus on, you can control how they feel. And if you can control how they feel, you can influence how they react. And I'm not saying everything is fake, but I am saying everything can be used. That's all I'm saying, you guys. So I know this episode was very much different than our normal conversation, but I'm an out of the box thinker, you guys, like in real life. And I feel like this is the kind of conversation people have in real life. And I'm not sitting here saying I have all the answers. I'm not saying everything is fake. I'm not saying everything is staged. I'm literally just saying pay attention. Pay attention to timing. Pay attention to how things are presented. Pay attention to how fast something starts to feel like it already has meaning attached to it. And most importantly, pay attention to how it makes you feel, because that's usually where the real influence is happening. It's called conditioning. Who took critical thinking in college? Raise your hand. Me. Because whether you believe it or not, or whether you believe any of this or not, one thing we can all agree on is that there's a lot happening all at once, straight up. And it's happening in a way that keeps people engaged, reacting, and constantly trying to keep up. And I don't know. That alone is worth sitting with, you guys. So yeah, this was your official, I might sound crazy, but hear me out episode. And if you actually follow along with me, you're here still, I am so in love with you, because I know this was a lot, but also it's not that crazy when you really think about it. It's just thoughts. We're just free thinking, you guys. And then we're going to go back to our regular scheduled programs. If this episode made you pause, think, or side-eye anything, even a little bit, send it to someone you would have this exact same conversation with, because those are the best kinds of people to keep around, in my opinion, if you ask me. And as always, you can find me on Instagram at ForbesManda_ or email me at info@balancedestiny.com. Of course, I will link it all in the show notes, and I will see y'all next week. Bye.